I'd like to call to order the meeting for the Mayor and City of Council for the month of June. Ask Mayor Pro Tem Diane Foster to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. You're welcome. You're all here, part of history tonight.
Yeah.
We're doing things a little bit differently in that we're combining this meeting, which is normally our workshop meeting, and our city council meeting, which is normally the following Monday. The reason is there's a conflict with the Maryland Municipal League summer meeting in next week, and that would prevent us from getting together as a group. In addition, the council voted to recess during the month of July this year because, again, of a conflict with the 4th of July. And we won't be meeting again until our August meeting. So I anticipate we'll have to cover a lot of ground tonight in order to get what we need to get done. If circumstances dictate, we may have to call a special meeting, but I hopefully don't think that'll happen, but we may, just depending on circumstances. So welcome, everyone. This, again, is a regular council meeting, so we'll be making motions and voting and doing those kind of things. So the first order of business is to review the minutes of May the 9th and May the 14th regular meetings. Does anyone have any additions or corrections?
If I could just make 2 grammatical corrections, if I could.
Sure.
The first being on the May 14th minutes, under Ordinance 04-2018, motion by Frazier to approve. I should say fully funding the first phases.
I didn't see that.
Instead, it says fooling funding.
Sorry.
The second one of the same nitpicky nature is under new business in the same meeting, number 8, about the magnetite. It says motion by approve the purchase by Frazier. Should say to approve. And that's all I found, Mr. Mayor.
All right, anyone else?
Move to accept with the changes.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
I must note that Councilman Frazier is absent this evening, so we'll supposed to take roll call, and I forgot to mention that as I took roll call. I did take it mentally, but I didn't announce it. All right, we'll have some time to receive public comment on items that are not on the agenda, and then a little bit later on the docket, we're going to have public comment on agenda items. That's before we discuss them as a council. So if you have any comments on any of the thing that appears on the agenda, you can interject your thoughts at that time. But right now, I want to call on anyone that has a comment regarding items that are not on the agenda. And remember to identify yourself and with your address, and you have 3 minutes.
Barbara Cook, Clubside Drive. I spoke about this before. I want to talk about the Taneytown record. In the past, I requested that it come out 12 times a year and it be skinnier. And I didn't get any feedback, so I guess that was a bomb. But I'd like to speak this time about, I'd like to see a second column in here. And that would be by the council or employees of the city. and they could talk about something coming up, something about their job, something they'd like to see the city do. I don't see enough information coming up about Taneytown. And I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people who could write a column, so that it means that once a year or once every 18 months, they might ask to do it a second time. So I hope you'll grant my wish.
Thank you, Barbara. Anyone else?
Good evening, Robin Fraser, Bentley Drive. I'm sorry that I was unable to make the public hearing on the budget, but I still wanted to make a comment. I know my comments were read in. I was disappointed that there was no reduction in the water sewer rates, at least a little bit of something, but I wanted to point out, at least to the best that I can figure, because I still haven't had my questions answered from January regarding these numbers, but just from things that have happened, I'm presuming that this is accurate. The numbers that Bobby Joe gave us back when Councilman Fraser proposed cutting the sewer rates in half showed that the $2 million surplus you had before the election would have supplemented that 50% decrease for about 6 years, and then that would use up that $2 million. The model was built on 25 units coming in per year, and it appears that another $2 million came in last year, which you all voted to put into a capital fund.
Sorry.
I was going to say. And then on this water allocations I'm looking at today, that's at least another $2 million coming in. So it looks like the idea of having a revolving fund that would use those funds to subsidize the 50% water sewer rate was a good idea. In year 11, in Bobby Joe's numbers, that's when the new users that come on because houses are being built was enough without any supplement to do the 50% reduction in sewer rates. So with $6 million coming in within a 3-year period of time, it appears, I would hope that you would at least consider lowering the sewer or water rates in the coming year. You didn't do it this past year, but certainly the 50% sewer rate reduction can work, and I'd be happy to submit some more numbers on that if you need them. And you can't answer my question, so I'm not sure if that's accurate. I will write email again and try to see if I can get the right numbers, so I can get those numbers to you. Thank you.
Thank you. If you were here at the last meeting, you have heard explained that the apparent surplus is we're anticipating a major capital expense at our wastewater treatment plant. And rather than borrow money, we figured we could use those funds to make this purchase. There's a piece of equipment called a belt filter press that's long past due. We bought it used probably 25 years ago, and it's just not doing the job. And what it does, to my understanding, I'm not an expert, is kind of separate the solids from the liquids, and we're hauling a lot more weight out than we need to, and that's costing us money. So that was the thinking of council at budget time for not making any further reductions this year. But absolutely, the water and sewer rate will be considered each and every year at budget time.
Well, $4 million is enough to take it almost for that, probably at least for the 15 years, at which point the number of people paying in because they've moved into the new homes actually pays for it. I know there's some debt that goes off. There might be debt that comes on, but I like the fact that you're using cash to pay for things. That'll keep it balanced out. But I think the numbers do work, and it looks like the units are coming in quicker than 25 a year. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, let me ask the council if there's any conflicts regarding the conflicts of interest regarding the agenda items tonight.
No, sir. No, sir.
All righty, we'll move on. Next, we'll entertain public comment pertaining to items that appear on the agenda. Does anyone care to speak to any item that appears on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, we're having some problems with the app on the wall, so we're just going to do it the old-fashioned way. Oh, okay, you got it.
Okay, Robin Fraser, Bentley Street. I just wanted to make a comment on the guidelines for public comment at meetings, and I think that you missed something. On number 8, it says, if any individual causes a disruption during any meeting or fails to comply with these guidelines or the instructions of the presiding officer, they will be asked to leave the meeting. And I think you forgot to write, and if they don't leave the meeting, they will be charged criminally with trespassing, disturbing the peace, and disorderly conduct. And I think you should warn people about that before you do it. Thank you.
Anyone else care to make any comments on the agenda items? All right, we'll move along then. Tonight we have for adoption a resolution 2018-05, which is the guidelines for public comment at meetings. Anyone care to make a motion to accept these guidelines?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. So carried. Next, resolution 2018-07 deals with the water allocation for June and July, 2 months. The details are in your packet. Would anyone care to make a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, like sign. Okay. We'll move into the city manager's report. Before I ask Jim to give his acting city manager's report, I would like to just let you know that I have talked the real thing here just about 5:30. And he is still struggling. He's has some issues with pain still, and they're concerned about that. He's going for a procedure tomorrow, and hopefully they'll be able to find out some more things. He seems to be in good spirits, and he's on a very bland diet, which is not helping his spirits any. I'll put it that way. But he was in good shape and thought he would be good. We had a nice conversation, and asked him if he had anything to interject in tonight's meeting, and he did not. So I just want to let you know to keep him in your prayers, and he'll be back with us soon, I hope. Jim, what would you like to tell us tonight?
Okay. Well, since the packets went out, we had a request and suggestion regarding the banners throughout town to leave them up through Carnival Week next week. It was suggested that we might have some additional folks coming through town, and you know, the banners have been very well received, and the thought was folks might like to see them up, you know, folks who might not ordinarily come through town. So we delayed taking them down at this point with the work order, but just wanted to get your okay to hang on another week and a half before we take them down.
I think it's a great idea.
You know, in 33 years on city council and 11 years as mayor, I've never ever seen anything that council has done we haven't had some complaints about, except this. This is the only thing that I've had no negative comments I sometimes tell people that if we stood on the corner handing out $20 bills, somebody complain about that. But this is truly the thing that seems to have touched everyone's heart, and I'm so glad that the American Legion took the initiative to get this done, and we as a council supported them. So I think that would be a good suggestion, in my opinion.
How long can we leave them up for?
Well, it really would be up to us, but the idea was that they would just be through the month of May.
Could we even extend them through July 4th? Do you think that'd be appropriate?
Are they even considering July 4th?
Not at this point.
Not at this
I think
point.
the idea was for them to be up for, just the month.
I guess the banners belong to the Legion. I mean, they're
Yeah.
their property, so they might have other ideas. Maybe they'll bring them back at Veterans Day or something like that.
Well, that was in the original plan.
That is the plan.
I think what we should ask them about is exactly just how fragile is the material. I mean, it may be okay to be outside for 4 to 6 weeks, but going past that, there could be an issue
That's
with
my
actually
point.
damaging the banners. So
That's my point.
that could be a talk to have with the Legion.
So they said they, thought just a couple more weeks through
Yeah,
Carnival Week
if
would be.
it's sorry with the Legion, it's sorry with us, I guess is the way I agreed that.
And go ahead.
And really, once they've been up for an extended period, they sort of become invisible.
Yeah.
Right.
Folks really get accustomed to them, and so probably good to have them just up for the month or so, and then also they'll stay. They won't be sun bleached and everything as quickly. They'll last a lot longer for putting them back up over the months that they're going to be celebrated. So.
Additionally, I'd like to publicly thank the Hildebrands for agreeing to display some of the banners on their property, as well as Wentz.
When Chevrolet, yep.
That the issue about, the only disappointment I have with this whole project is that we were not able to continue all the way down Baltimore Street with them. And there seems to be some pushback from Potomac Edison allowing us to put them on the poles, but I'm going to make a phone call or two to see if we can't do something about that. So anyway, that would offer more opportunities for more veterans to be displayed more prominently.
The only other thing, I added a couple things in the report to Henry's usual items and did a little update on those, but I did want to call to your attention the fifth thing that's in the report, the Syrian property. That is, and I'm going to hop up to point to it on the map real quick. This parcel that's in yellow at the bottom and pink at the top, that's along the Antrim Boulevard alignment. This property was discussed at the Planning Commission meeting, and the property owner is interested in an ag preservation easement, but a portion of the property is about twice as large as the colored part. And the portion that's outside of the growth area is roughly 20 acres, and then there's about 20 acres, give or take, in the growth area. So they are interested in being pulled out of the growth area so that they can go into ag preservation. Planning Commission obviously has some concerns regarding the Antrim Boulevard alignment, and they wanted to have a little input from the mayor and council if there was any interest in discussing the idea with the property owner that perhaps we could secure an alignment for the bypass in exchange for releasing some of the property from the growth area. So it's not something that's going to happen before the ag preservation folks go to the county commissioners later this month, but we do have a couple months before appraisers will be visiting the property for the finalization of the property to go into ag preservation. So if there's any interest in having some talks with the property owner, I'd like to have some input on that to get back to the planning commission. If not, they can pursue it in a future year. We are in the process of updating the comp plan, but we're several months away from the land use and the municipal growth element. So we're really not quite at the point to talk about you know, specific properties. So this is a little out of order, but there might be some opportunity as well.
And we would be, what did you say, that we would exchange one thing for the other? What was the other, what?
That a portion of the possible Antrim Boulevard alignment crosses the northern tip of the property.
Now, how feasible or how realistic is it at this point that we have, that bypass is being planned? Because the last time we talked about it, I thought it wasn't even on the county's list of potential projects.
It's been
Yes.
taken off the state
Yeah,
list.
it's not on the
We've,
radar.
right, we've preserved it in our comprehensive plan.
Okay.
It's just for the sake of it being in the plan.
Is the gray area existing ag easement land?
Yes.
All right, now, of course, what happens is, if we become surrounded by ag easement land, we can't grow any further. That limits our ability to develop any further growth. So we need to consider not only that, but whether we support the idea of that going into ag preservation. That one piece is not contiguous with any other ag preservation, and I thought that when they look at ag preservation grants, they consider the fact that it's contiguous to other properties. So I don't know how they'll react to that. But it could, easily create an enclave issue in the future should it go into ag pres and the neighbor's not. See what I'm saying?
Jim, out of curiosity, and if you can't point it out right now, that's okay, but in what areas do we have at this point that could potentially become residential, that could go into development?
Well, on the map there, the yellow and the orange are areas that are designated for residential growth. The green is open space, so a lot of that is existing parkland, or there are some wooded areas. For example, the Sewell property in the northwesternmost portion of the map that's in green there. But all the yellow and orange are potential residential areas. And you probably can't see from across the room, but this is the comprehensive plan map, so it shows our entire growth area. So some of that area that's in color is outside of the city limits, but still considered within our growth area. So the city limits are a good bit smaller than the overall colored portion of the map.
This was planned development a few years ago. There was a developer that was in fact, the same developer that developed Carroll Vista, was in looking to develop this particular farm parcel and include golf course and stuff like that, but never materialized regardless. But again, it has been a potential development site in the not so distant past. So that doesn't mean that it couldn't be in the future.
So we would basically be telling them.
Nice flat piece of property.
So basically, we would be telling them, if you want to go ahead and do ag preservation, that's fine, but we want to reserve the right to use the property for the bypass should that ever come to pass. Am I understanding that correctly?
By keeping it in the growth area, effectively, that's what you're doing.
Okay.
The question would be whether you would want to reduce the amount of the property that is within the growth area, perhaps preserving an adequate amount for the Antrim Boulevard corridor. But if the concern of ag preservation encircling the city, which that certainly we're seeing that happen over time. You can see ag preservation is right up against our growth area in a number of areas. So it probably is just a matter of time before we are completely encircled by ag preservation. So if we do nothing, basically they will be able to put the portion of the property beyond the growth area into ag preservation and perhaps petition sometime in the future for the rest of the property. Or they may comment when we get to that point on the comprehensive plan update, it may be revisited at that time, and the planning commission may have some other recommendations at that point. Ultimately, the comp plan does come before this body, though, for final approval.
And I guess, so my next question is, what kind of direction are you looking for from us? This is something that,
Whether there's interest from the council in entering into any discussions if reducing the growth area is an option to consider.
and
When's the update to the comprehensive plan?
It's been an ongoing effort. We're through about 8 chapters, but we have several chapters to go, and I would imagine at least 6 months away from being able to get anything to the point of being released for public comment for 60-day review.
You can't, and you don't want to dictate what a property owner can do with their property. But this comprehensive plan is a serious piece of work that required a lot of attention, a lot of money, and a lot of effort. My recommendation would be to leave things as they are and entertain further discussions as they arise. Because we haven't had any discussions. No one's, in other words, are we creating an issue that's not theirs, I guess is what I'm saying. The property owners might say, fine, that's great, and move forward. Or if they have an issue, then they'll be back before us and say, look, we really can't live with that. Then we could deal with that. That would be my suggestion.
well, Mayor, you make a good point, and you highlight, some of my concerns is that I just, uncomfortable with telling a property owner what they can or can't do. So, like you said, if this is something they are interested in doing, that's one thing, but it's not something that I would be comfortable dictating to them that, they have to do. So I guess, is it possible the option just to ask them and explore the idea with them? I mean, is that within the range of possibility?
We can certainly reach out to them and
Do we need to do anything except for let them reach out to us? I mean, we can define the issue as it is. This is our comp plan, and a portion of your property is in that comp plan, and we'd like to continue with that. Do you have any problem with it? And if they say no, everything's okay with us, then the issue's solved. If they have an issue, then they'll be before us and explain their side of the case, and we'll evaluate it based on the needs of the town.
well, that's actually what prompted them to come before the planning commission, because they were not happy with not being able to pursue preservation for more of the property. And when they came before the planning commission was not comfortable with the idea of adjusting the growth area boundary without some feedback from the mayor and council. And Brad, do you have anything maybe to add from the discussion?
I think the only thing that came out of planning commission discussion was there is a logical place that the property could be bisected. Basically take 8 acres out that would stay within the Antrim Boulevard route, and then they could do what they wish with the rest of it. It's only about half the property in our growth area. Now keep in mind, it wasn't put there by us except with permission from, I think it was the father of the person who has it now. So it's not that the city's going in saying, this is our growth area, live with it. I mean, there were discussions at the time that we would like you to be in there, and they're very open to that for development reasons. But that's changed through generations. But there is...
The father is deceased, by the way.
Correct, yes. But there's about 8 acres that if they were more agreeable to bisect, subdivide, something like that, we could actually maintain that within our growth area and then reserve it for the Antrim Boulevard extension. And they seemed somewhat open to that idea. They were thinking, it was. They were thinking it'd be more like 5 acres, but it's actually 8 acres when you map it out and measure it. But it's actually it's a very logical line to put on there.
So,
Reach out to them, I guess.
Yeah, it's already been brought up.
Yeah, I mean, The planning commission wasn't ready to sign off on that without the bigwigs coming in saying yea or nay, so.
And at this point, just to be clear, we would not be actually updating the map at this point. All that we would be doing would be writing a letter saying that, you know, that the planning commission has discussed this, and, you know, should we be able to reach some agreement with the property owner as to we're okay with this much going into ag preservation, if this much is still reserved, or perhaps even
Is all the property that they own being petitioned for ag preservation?
I don't think that that's final until they get to the point of appraising the property.
Because that could take up a good piece of that white area you see on the other side of that yellow. Which means that would all be gray. That would eliminate
Well, no.
our growth to the
What are you
south.
talking?
Well, their property, hang on, their property is oddly shaped to begin with, but if you imagine this red line is our growth area, follow it down, and I'm just kind of outlining the property that's in question. It's an oddly shaped property. It's not this, it's not even this little bit right here. It's just literally that.
But there is property on the other side of the road, on the other side of Feeser Road.
There is, but that's not theirs.
That's not the
That-
property.
That's not their property.
That could be contiguous. That's where the petitioner lives, I believe. It may be two different deeds. One was deeded to the father and the other to the daughter. And if the daughter is interested in putting her property in ag pres too, that would, I think we needed to, it would help us if we could define how much area they want to put in ag pres. It would help me in my decision. I mean, I don't see them creating a 20 or 40 put, or again, 20 or 40 acre parcel in ag pres that's not contiguous to anything.
It is 41 acres is what they're looking to put in. That's what they presented to Planning Commission.
That's not including the 8 acres that we were talking.
That includes those
That
8 acres,
includes,
yeah.
okay.
So if you remove that, you're down to 33.4-ish, yeah.
They have made application, and, you know, the property will be going before the, it's part of the package that's going before the county commissioners later this month. The question is just how much of the property is going to go into the program. So they, you know, have already been reviewed, and it looks like they're a very good candidate for the program. And as I said, the question is just how much of the property can be preserved.
What effect does it have that their property is adjacent to a Carroll County easement property? Does that have any effect on this at all, or
It makes it a stronger candidate for preservation.
is that what it is?
It is similar to what the mayor said, that if it's contiguous to another preserved property, it scores higher
Right.
for the program. So the program tries to get contiguous blocks of property, and properties have to be either a certain size initially, or they'll accept a smaller property than they normally would if it's contiguous to another
To a
preserved
larger,
property.
right.
So that does play into how they rank them.
All right. So what shall Jim convey to the owners? We don't have any problem, we want to keep our 8 acres out?
I suggest that we try to keep that 8 acres out of ag pres and into our growth area. That's my suggestion.
All right, everybody?
Yeah, see what they think.
So we'll go back to the planning commission with the idea that we can entertain some flexibility on the growth area, provided we maintain adequate acreage for the road alignment.
And Trimble,
Yeah.
yes.
Thank you. We'll get back to the commission with that.
Thank you, Jim.
All right. What else for us, Jim?
That's about it, unless there are any questions about things that have gone on in the last month or on Henry's report. I'll do my best to answer.
We're still able to open the doors every day. That's a big plus. Jay, do you have, have any questions on the departmental reports? All right. Next, we have legal report. Jay, what do you have for us?
I have a bunch of stuff for us because we're not meeting, and so I have everything that we're going to need to know about in the next 2 months. I want to start out with the fun thing that says thanks for you that came out this morning to watch the torch run go by, and the Taneytown Police Department doing the torch run for the Special Olympics. Next year, maybe we can have more participation from the police, and maybe some members of the council would like to do it as well.
I saw it when I was coming up 140.
It does block. If you didn't see it, you saw the traffic jam it creates.
Yes.
But next year, I'm hopeful that maybe some of the police officers will actually run, and it won't be just me and a couple of the citizens. So that would be fun. But anyway, thanks for coming out early and doing that. And the athlete that they select is a Taneytown athlete that goes, so it's always a good time for them. So. Okay, on to the serious business. We had an ethics committee meeting last month, and a lot of things came out of the ethics committee meeting that they wanted directed to the city council for you to ponder. Nothing is for any action from you all tonight, but they are requesting that you take action, and so you have the summer recess to think about what you want to do. So the first issue, these are issues dealing with, unbelievably, the election from last year in May. They are still hanging out there and unresolved. So they are frustrated, as many of you can imagine, that we still have to deal with this a year after, but it is the way it is. The first issue deals with the robocall issues. You remember we talked about this at some prior meeting, and it's been a while, that the Ethics Commission believes that, and sent a letter to the individual, Jack Ames for Defend Life, who was identified in the robocalls that were done as part of the campaign process, and that robocall supported candidates. And so therefore, under the campaign finance ordinance, there needed to be a filing if the expenditures were more than the allowance in the thing. And so they directed at a meeting that they had earlier or later last year to have a letter sent to Mr. Ames and say, did you spend that much? If you did, here are the forms, fill them out, and we're good. And there was no response. So they met again, and this is the Ethics Commission, and they were told there was no response. And at that point in time, they said, we want a registered, certified letter to go to them. And if there is no response again, we want this issue given to the city council to say, what are you going to do about it? Because the Ethics Commission can't do anything about it, but they would like something done. They would like the law to be enforced. So that was where we left it at our retreat. I believe that was back maybe even prior to the retreat. So the letter went out to Mr. Ames, certified. It was signed for by somebody at their place in early May. And we haven't heard anything from them at all. So that issue is hanging out there. There needs to be some resolution to that. The what's and wherefores and what can we do may be left for us to go into a closed session to get the details, but it is a fairly simple thing, is that if they spent less than the threshold, all they need to do is send a letter to us saying that, and then the campaign finance ordinance is satisfied, because we know. If they spent more than the threshold, all they have to do is say that on the form, and it's done as well. So I don't know what the issue would be. There's, at some point in time, what are we supposed to do? Go knock on doors? So think about that. Think about how you want to deal with it. There's a lot of ethics issues that you're going to have to deal with, and this is just one. Any questions about that? Okay. The second item are issues that have come from the Ethics Commission regarding potential changes to the campaign finance law. Again, they're frustrated because the campaign finance law that you passed, that they are set to administer, has not been 100% effective in getting compliance. And so they have 3 areas that they would like to focus on, and I want to tell you what those 3 areas are and tell you why, because I'm sure you want to know the why. The first area is the Ethics Commission wants you to change the campaign finance ordinance to allow the impositions of monetary fines and other penalties against people who do not comply with the filings. So we already have one example that I just gave you, which was that. And some people say, well, you know, they're not from here, they're from Baltimore, how do you enforce that? Well, there's ways to do that. But we're talking about filings that were done by the candidates that were running for office and what to do with that. And so the example that I want to give you is the fact that all of you that ran know that there were filings that you had to do. And you got rid of your campaign accounts if you had them, and I think Councilman Vigliotti was the only one sitting up there who had a campaign account at the end of the campaign cycle, which would have been last May. And you were told that if you keep that campaign account, you have to do a yearly filing at the end of the year, December 31. Councilman Vigliotti, you elected to give your campaign money to charity, and there's provisions for that. You filed that, and that was done. 2 other candidates that had campaign accounts, Ms. Kreisig and Ms. Adelaide, elected to keep their campaign accounts open. And so at the end of the year, they filed their year-end report. And they filed it. The Ethics Commission eventually met to review that report, and they found that it did not comply. And they rejected the reports, but both of their reports, gave it back to them and said, and now we're talking January of 18, redo these reports because they don't comply. The reasons they didn't comply were pretty straightforward. It's like a checking account. You have to start, your starting balance of this report has to be the ending balance of the last report. That was pretty clear that it wasn't the case. So they resubmitted the reports. The Ethics Commission again met, this time a few months ago, and reviewed those reports. And they again found both those reports non-compliant. And the contents of those reports were so convoluted in the fact that it didn't make sense of how they came up that they actually had requested a presentation, which you guys have a copy of, and that was presented at the Ethics Commission meeting. You can read this, a PowerPoint slide. And the bottom line with this, there was different problems with each candidate. Ms. Kreisig's didn't have any details about how she got rid of her money. She just basically said, I put it in the collection plate at church. It didn't say what church, it didn't say what, any of that. But the issue she had is when she used her year-end statement to say that the bank account is closed and it had X dollars in it, then she went and gave us the filings at the year end. When she redid her statements, there was more money to be accounted for. And she put that in the collection plate. But the obvious question is, if the bank account at the end of the year had X dollars, how, when you redid your math, did you come up with more money than the bank said you had when you closed it? Does that make sense? Okay. So that was an issue with Ms. Kreisig. And then the issue with Ms. Adelaide was similar to that, in the fact that when she went through and revised hers, she found an error that was carried over several reports, and she corrected that error. But she had the same problem in the fact that she donated the money at the end of the year to Agora Ministries and got a letter from them saying, we accepted this money, and the bank statement matched that amount, and the bank statement was zero. But when she redid her report, she found that there was more money, and so she created a money order and gave that away. And the obvious question is, how do you have more money when the bank statement matched what you gave away and everything was zero? Where did you come up with it? So that means there's some missing information. So the candidates were instructed via a letter. The Ethics Commission said, send letters to the candidates and send them certified mail. And this happened last month. Ms. Kreisig picked up her certified mail. Ms. Adelaide did not pick up her certified mail, but both were sent registered mail, and neither of those letters came back. And they were instructed that they had until tomorrow, June 7th, to refile the forms. This will be the 3rd time that they've had to refile the forms. So you get what the issue is that the Ethics Commission is dealing with. They were told by you to enforce this law, but people aren't really doing it diligently. And it can be done diligently, because 3 of you did. And so they feel that the only way to put some teeth in this law is to have some type of penalties or monetary fines. It's interesting to note that you do have those provisions in the financial disclosure sections that you all fill out, all the candidates fill out, that if you don't fill those out and they're not in a timely manner, they can issue monetary fines to people that says this is what needs to happen. So one of the things that we're really looking at is what would that be? You know, again, I don't have any suggestions. I'm just giving you what the situation is. The second issue that comes out of that whole thing I explained to you is the fact that there's going to be an expressed need to have other information provided. It's kind of like a tax return. You fill in your tax returns with all the information, and if it makes sense, it doesn't get audited and you're good. But if it doesn't make sense, you get audited and then you're asked for information. There should be a requirement that if you have a campaign bank account, which if you raise money, you have to have a campaign bank account, that you submit those bank statements. They believe that they have the authority to have them, but it doesn't state it in the statute, and we believe that it should state it in the statute so that you submit your campaign information and you submit your bank account information, and then it all should match. We wouldn't have this problem that we're having now if we had bank accounts, because we'd be able to see that. So they believe that they should be allowed to have bank account information and other information, meaning receipts and things like that. One of the concerning parts that came out of the latest forms that these candidates filed is there were tremendous amounts of transactions that occurred in cash. Now, we have a provision that says you can't accept a certain amount of cash, but we didn't have a provision that you couldn't pay things in cash. And you would think that if you paid things in cash, you'd have a receipt to show that, but that's the example of giving it to a church in the collection plate. There's no accountability to show, did that happen?
So the alleged collection plate donations were in cash?
Yeah. And payments to vendors were in cash. Now, I get it. If you're buying lunch for your campaign finance crew at the Country Kitchen, you paid cash out of your pocket and you reimburse yourself and you have a receipt that shows that and you show the reimbursement. I mean, if you were accountable for other people's money, just like you are, you know that you're going to have these type of paper trails. I think it was obvious that most candidates would know that, but that didn't happen here. And there were a lot of cash transactions. So one of the things that they said is that they want to mandate that the accounts not be savings accounts, that they be checking accounts, so that you have to issue a draft that you can follow up on, even if it's reimbursing yourself, meaning that I paid $10 for sandwiches for my campaign workers, and therefore I have a check that's to me for $10 for reimbursement, and I have a receipt for $10 that shows this. It's basic stuff, which comes back to the beginning of, you know, these volunteers showed up 3 times now, and they're at their wits' end because they said, what are we supposed to do when people don't comply? So you can see the report there. The candidates themselves were sent this, so this is something that they were aware of, that they saw what the issues were. And the Ethics Commission said, what is it going to take? Because the staff is basically doing the work. I mean, at this point in time, it's if you want this thing complied with, give us all your information and we'll sit down with you and help you. That shouldn't really be required. This is like keeping a checking account. You know, everybody knows how to do that. So those are the things that they would like you to consider. And of course, we'd have to amend the law to do that, the ordinance to do that, and we'd have to talk about the specifics. But you know,
So how does that impact the improprieties that have already occurred?
well, even though they're flustered by it, they basically believe that they need to keep pushing the candidates to the point where they're either going to comply or they're just not going to comply, and then what are you going to do? But you're not going to be able to make it retroactive. You're not going to be able to fine them for that.
Well, after a year, it's obvious between those 2 candidates that they're not going to comply. I mean, it seems like they're trying to dodge the issue.
I don't know what to tell you. If you can imagine, and I'm sure you all in your careers one way or another have audited other people's information. It's a very tedious task for people who aren't involved to do that. And that's what Clara and the staff had to do. They laid everything out on the council table and spent hours trying to compare it to make sure it's right. And people are saying, you know, why would you do such a thing? It's not a big money involved. It's the fact that you passed this law to make this happen, and the volunteers on your ethics commission said, you know, that's what you wanted done, that's what has to happen.
It's transparency and honesty, too.
So, you know, this report basically has it. You can see what the problems are and see what the issues are.
Do you have recommendations? I mean, if we gather again in August, would you have an idea of how this law should look?
I think that we can use some models. I mean, we're not redoing things, but the state, for example. If anybody has run for a state office, county commissioner, one of those offices that get generated by the state, you make an error in your campaign report, it's like dealing with the DMV. You get a fine sent out to you without it just comes in the mail that you didn't do it right and you're getting fined because of it. Because you signed forms when you ran that said you were going to abide by this and it's the state law. And we have stories that the Ethics Commission talked about saying, there was an error in their thing. They said you didn't file it correctly and they fined them. These aren't big dollar fines, but they're fines enough that make people spend the time to do it right. And that's what this is like. It's like somebody doing their homework right versus having the teacher correct it all. Which is better for the teacher, the person who spends the time to do it right. So, those are the thoughts on the ethics board. You have any questions on that?
No.
Okay, the next issue is some updates on some lawsuits that we have pending. If you read in today's paper, you'll see that the lawsuit that you authorized to foreclose on the tax sale for Trevanion Terrace, everybody recalls the Trevanion Terrace tax sale, that's been filed, so that will not go to tax sale again this year. The lawsuit's pending and you're going to go through a public notice, so if you look in the newspaper, that's what you'll see when you find that what that's about, that's what it is. You recall that the entity that owned that parcel in Trevanion Terrace didn't pay the taxes on it for years and has mortgages on it, and nobody wants it or maintains it, and the city has to maintain it. So the city purchased the taxes at tax sale and is now foreclosing it to get title to the property. That's an important issue for the city to finalize because that is one of the stormwater retrofit projects that the county is doing under the Stormwater Phase 2 issue and PDS Phase 2. And they have some leftover grant money from another project that they can take and expedite this project. So they are going to start trying to do the design on this. I figure this will be done in 90, 120 days, something like that, the lawsuit. And we shouldn't have any problem. I've talked to all the lenders. ACMB Bank and M&T Bank both have mortgages on the property, and they're not going to pay the taxes or be involved. It's a lost piece for them. So that's what I mean, there's no really big updates except I didn't want you to have questions when you saw it in the paper and things like that. So the next thing is, being the big lawyer now, is that we're filing lawsuits. Everybody remembers the Roberts Mill Stormwater Retrofit Project, the bridge, the whole 9 yards. Well, one of the parcels that the bridge abutting that's going to sit on is Parcel E of Sarah's Choice. We call it Roberts Mills, but the Sarah's Choice was the original place. Parcel E was an open space parcel that was supposed to be deeded to the city when the development was complete. It's on the plans that says this parcel is supposed to be deeded to the city. It's in the Public Works Agreement. This parcel is to be deeded to the city. Guess what didn't happen when the developer left? It didn't get deeded to the city. The city maintains it, has been maintaining it. It's not a very big piece anyway, but it's critical to this project. So one of the things we have to do is clear the title, because it is in the title of the developer, who is a double defunct, if you can be that. One corporation bought by another corporation, all of those corporations defunct and not active. So therefore, the title is not in the city's name. We need to get it into the city's name, which is going to be involving filing a quiet title lawsuit. So one of the things that I need is the authorization to do that, because we've talked about it, you're kind of familiar with it, but we've never gotten to the point where you said, yes, go ahead and do this. And so after my report, I need you to make the motion that authorizes me to go do that, so we can file that.
What claim deed wouldn't solve this problem?
We can't find anybody to sign it. That's the problem, because all of the corporations are no longer valid if the state of Maryland, they're forfeit, so therefore they don't have any authority to do it, even if I could track down one of the directors to do it. So it'll be another easy pain lawsuit because we have to go through all the hassle, but we'll be suing these defunct corporations and they won't be responding, and after the period of time goes through, then title will happen. This is different than the other lawsuit. The mechanics of this lawsuit are the fact that it's two ways. Quieting title because we have an equitable interest, meaning they promised to give it to us, they just didn't go through with it. We have adverse possession because we've been maintaining the property in excess of 20 years and using it like it's our own and that type of thing. So it's a twofold lawsuit.
Anyone
So-
care to make that motion?
Oh, are you ready for it? So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Like sign, so carry.
You'll see some things. And the last thing is an update on the Frazier lawsuit appeal, Robin Frazier's case for the open meetings appeal. As you know, right now it's pending in the Court of Special Appeals, and the motion was filed by Ms. Frazier. The town did its response motion, and you remember there was some delay in the filing of the motion. The town filed its remotion, and Ms. Frazier is entitled to file a reply brief to the town's motion. And that was failed to be filed on time. It missed it by a few hours. And so Ms. Frazier has now filed a motion to enlarge the time frame to file her response. So that is pending with our lawyers that are going to be responding to that. So that's where we are on that. Everything is still churning, slow, and delay. Any issues? Any questions? Okay, we'll
Good.
talk again. If you feel that, I kind of think that in August we'll get together with some ideas, and if you feel we need to have a closed session, you can kind of state that, and then we can work that out for the Jack Ames issue if you want.
All righty.
Mr. Mayor, I have two questions, I guess, on an unrelated issue, but the question themselves are kind of related to each other. I guess I'd like to know, I mean, if you can provide it this evening, if there's an update on the small cell tower restrictions that we had talked about in the past. And then, in relation to that, is there a way, or unless it already exists under home rule, that we can pass some kind of like a 10th Amendment at the municipal level which reserves our right to protect our own interests against encroachments, such as with the small cell tower thing? And, you know, if that is possible, is it almost like we could use it as another way to, you know, kind of proffer a position that we might have to protect ourselves?
Okay, the twofold question then. We'll start with the first one, that the proposed ordinance that's being worked on is being worked on by CDM, the engineer right now, so they are actively going through the ordinance, you know, taking the parts that don't apply and trying to get the specs that would apply. We're still using the same model, the one that's the model for the country, basically came from Gaithersburg, and other governments, and we're talking big governments, are adopting theirs as well, so like Montgomery County and things like that. And the problem with trying to copy them is that it's too unwieldy. So we're still trying to find small cells on small town sizes. So we're actively moving forward with that. There isn't really anything going on at the state level, okay? So the state, remember it was summer study. Summer doesn't mean summer for them, okay? So summer study is that. And they may bring that back next year. And again, remember the plan was for everybody to say, we already have it instituted, and the people that are approaching us, they don't have a problem because either they haven't been approaching us or they're dealing with our process, so why do you need to do anything? So with specifics to that, since AT&T started to merge with whoever, T-Mobile, I think it was, it may not be those two, but it's AT&T and somebody, somehow the applications for mobility, which was the company that was approaching us, have been withdrawn. There really weren't applications, but the idea of putting small cells up in their locations, they've been withdrawn now. And it has something to do with the merger because maybe they're not a player anymore in it. They still have one site that they're interested in doing, and that's a site on the state highway down that way. And we're telling them you have to wait until this happens. But you can see what I'm saying is that the field is just changing ever one. So that kind of gives you the update. As far as your 10th Amendment, the problem is that we're the low man on the totem pole, so everybody can do everything to us. So since we are creatures of the state, we can't pass anything, even under home rule authority, that would limit the state's authority to do anything to us because we were created by them. So therefore, if they want to do something, they can trump it right across the board and it wouldn't happen. The problem is not going to be the state. in reality, okay? They're going to talk about it next year. The problem is going to be the federal government. The FCC right now has a case, and I don't recall the name of it for you, but they have a case pending right now that is talking about local preemption, that it would be preempted on a federal level from local control across the board, state, everybody. And if that case happens that way, obviously that's a big problem for us. But you know how this works. They talked about maybe passing a rule next year, so like January. If that happened and they preempted it, you know all the local governments would sue. We do not need to be in the front of this, okay? I'm talking local governments like the city of Dallas, the city of Tacoma, Washington. Those are the big players on this thing that there's a task force. They can do it. We just can ride their coattails. I mean, so they make the city of Gaithersburg look small, right? They're the big players here. So if the FCC does what they're going to do, there would be appeals and appeals and appeals and appeals. And we would still be in holding pattern, which comes back to we need to do our own thing so we have something figured out while everybody else figures out what's going on.
Right. So I guess the only option then is to pay very careful attention to what's coming out of any capital. And then if it's something that does line up with our interests and our own laws, and we have to do whatever we can to preempt that.
Yeah, I mean, it is something that's going to happen. It's like the old days of cell towers where everybody, the big towns dealt with it, and then eventually it gets to the small towns. You know, you go around Westminster, you start to see a lot more of them now. And when you start, I mean, I came out of Lowe's the other day and there was one right there. And, you know, it didn't look horrible, but it was in an industrial area by Lowe's. It would look not good in front of somebody's house, I would imagine. So that's the status, long and involved as it is.
While this is on the table, I was going to bring this up later, but it's a good time to bring it up now. Each year, MML asks for legislative action requests from councils all over the state. And these are requests that we would send for consideration by the legislative committee for this next session that would address a particular concern that you might have. So, one of the points that was made as the legislative committee adjourned this past session was that we feel like there's going to be an onslaught or a battle to be waged to protect our home rule ability. In other words, preventing the state, the county, on up from imposing their will upon municipalities. So I don't know whether you have anything in mind that we could craft to kind of protect ourselves, but it would be a good item and might get some traction with the legislative committee, is what I'm saying. So legislative action request is simply a request from council that would address a particular need that you see needs to be addressed. And so we have until about the middle of July to get that in. So think about that. If anybody has anything, I can help you with the form and the protocol and so forth about what to do, but it's not very hard.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you,
Did
Jim.
that answer your question?
Yeah, it did.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, let's move into old business. We awarded we haven't awarded, we'll do that tonight, but we opened a street sweeping bid from one client, I assume, Jim. And that's the same company we're dealing with now. Mm-hmm. Again, it disturbs me, and I guess it's probably the third or fourth time in a row that we've opened a bid and only had one bidder.
Well, and Kevin said he did reach out to other companies, and they just,
One withdrew.
Well, I know, that's what's said every
Yeah.
time,
although I can't imagine there's a
Every-
whole
every
heck
time
of a
we
lot of
say
street
that.
sweeping businesses.
but it's still only one bid.
Right.
And I don't know what we need to do about that. I don't know whether, we send the advertisement to the Frederick Post and the Carroll County Times and the Hanover Sun. Is that, maybe we need to change the strategy. I don't know.
Well, there's an online state resource that businesses go to looking for things to bid on for municipalities and county and for state. And that's a very common thing for businesses to look at, as opposed to the Carroll County Times, the Frederick Post, and
Well, again, I think we're eliminating we're kidding,
But you have to
ourselves that we
subscribe
think
to
we're
it.
going to get major players reading those papers, because they're not. And that's why there's not to be another vehicle. If there's an electronic means to do that, we need to figure out what that is and plug it into our system. But it disturbs me that, again, this street sweeping outfit that submitted the bid is the one that's been doing it for years, and quite frankly, I've got mixed feelings about the job they do, but they're the only one to bid, so I guess we don't have any choice. Does anyone care to make a motion to approve the street sweeping bid?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. And somehow make a note to investigate ways of posting our bids on some kind of network.
Electronic media.
Right. All right. Update on Bollinger and Park and the gazebo projects, and I vowed to keep this on every docket. I realize Henry's been away and Bob has been sick too, and I don't know how much update we have.
Well, Bob did update his report when he returned to work Monday, and but the CDM is working on the RFP for the gazebo project, since there's a good bit less engineering involved with that one. They're doing the RFP now, so we should have that. I'm hoping we'll have that
In August.
for August. And for the Bollinger Park project, we've had some discussions on that, and want to make sure that we involve the planning commission with that through the site plan process, to make sure that it's in sync with all the other related plans with the city comprehensive plan and things like that.
I'm confident that our Parks and Recreation Director is enthusiastically supporting these projects.
So they are moving ahead.
All right. Next, we have the monthly financial report. Anyone care to make a motion to approve the monthly financial report?
so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. So carried. Next, we have the accounts payable report. Anyone care to make a motion to approve the accounts payable?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. So carried. Next, we will have council member reports. Brad, do you want to start us off tonight?
I'd be happy to, Mr. Mayor. Taneytown's Lions baseball regular season is over. We are in playoffs now.
Good grief, that was quick.
I know, you're telling me. Some of those games are not quick enough, though. Unfortunately, our 8U team lost their first playoff game last night, so we are out for the season, which is probably not the worst thing in the world. But it was a good season. They are having their end of season picnic July I believe it's the 8th. And getting ready for fall ball for that. Planning Commission, we covered everything here tonight that we already talked about in Planning Commission, so I have nothing to report there. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, what about you?
As many of you know, or I hope you know, the Relay for Life was postponed and will take place on June 16th at Memorial Park at 10 a.m. So the mayor and council will be there in our Star Wars garb, hopefully. And we hope...
I was so disappointed.
Yeah, well, we didn't get the weather we thought, but better safe than sorry. So everybody come out, hopefully, and enjoy. That's it.
Joe?
Well, I also want to remind everybody about Relay for Life. I think it's really going to be an exciting time. And in addition to that, as we head into summer, there are going to be a number of new businesses opening. There are going to be a number of events here in town. And these events will all be attended by our police to keep us safe. So when you see them out, thank them for the work that they do and say hello. And that's it from me.
Judy?
Yeah. Shout out of FSK graduated Monday night, so congratulations to all of the senior class. The speaker was very entertaining. The math teacher. And then Kevin's been working on getting, well, he's working on getting electric to our lamp posts so that we can use them for Christmas decorations for this coming year.
Awesome.
So I keep.
You had a quote in the paper about donating surplus Christmas decorations?
Yeah, segue.
Explain that, will you?
What we're gonna do is hopefully, if anybody has any, old lights that don't work, we can recycle and actually get money back for them. Lights that do work, we can put them to use. Christmas balls, even if they're ugly, we can spray paint them with metallic paint. Wreaths, garland, we're gonna recycle and reuse everything that we're offered, in addition to whatever we build and hopefully have to buy very, very
I
So you're gonna take everything.
I'm gonna take everything and then we'll figure out what we can use and what we'll have to,
I think that's something you should continue to remind people about. I mean,
it's gonna be an ongoing process.
it's kind of a traumatic experience for me to pack up Christmas decorations. and to get into them in July.
I know, but we've had plenty of rainy days, so people should be utilizing those. So we'll see. I know.
All right, okay. Well, that's a good idea. That's good. Only thing I had was to remind everybody, of course, of the Fireman's Carnival next week, and also the MML convention. Well, a number of us will be going down there. I'm very excited about what we will learn and what we'll be able to bring back and how we'll be able to profit the city of Taneytown through our knowledge. And I'm looking forward to that time. Joe announced 2 grand openings, new businesses opening. We celebrated Easy Does It. They opened a month or so ago. I've been out there several times, and although I've heard some mixed reviews from the community at large, I've had a pleasant experience each time that I've been out there. So I encourage you to give it a try if you haven't been out there. The flower shop opens directly across the street. Grand opening. It's been open for about a month since Mother's Day. And I was in there yesterday and bought Myra a birthday present. Today is her birthday, and I'm at the council meeting, and she's at Frederick eating dinner with my daughter. So
I hope it was a good present you got her.
More than just flowers.
it was. But anyway, they had some nice things. I was very impressed with that little shop. It's very nice. And the gun shop, Bollinger Gunsmithing, is now open. They'll have their grand opening the same day, and I told Joe before we started, on the 14th of June, we'll have kind of a Guns N' Roses event. First time in Taneytown for that.
And the mayor's going to dress as Slash for that event. Get him a top hat and everything.
And that's about all I have. We attended the graduation, as Judy said. Brad was there too, and that was very, very nice. And Silver Oaks graduation is coming up on the 21st. I hope to be able to attend that. So I wish everybody a safe and happy summer. I hope you enjoy it. It's my favorite time of the oh, my golly, I'm glad you held that up.
Is that a cue card?
Everybody had received in the email today a letter from the Department of Housing and Urban, what's the initial?
DCHD. Yeah.
Of a company that is planning to solicit low-income housing money from Department of Housing to construct apartments on Westview. And they invited us to comment, or invited me to comment. They would send it to the chief elected official. And my comments basically are that I think we have enough low-income housing. And I don't, and this doesn't comply with our zoning either. And that's basically what I plan to say, unless somebody has an objection to that. But I wanted to get council's input on that before I fired off a letter to the folks in Crownsville or wherever they are. I guess they're in Prince George's County.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I asked Jim earlier, because I was reading down the scale that they had for what they meant by low-income housing, and apparently it's only a percentage of what they plan to construct. 10% to be exact. So we're not talking very many homes, correct, Jim?
Well, I think,
36 units.
36
I
units.
think it's 36 units. and-
10% is what, 3?
No, only 4 of them are at market rate. The rest would be low income.
Right,
See-
it looks like, yeah, the 10% I think is referring to the market rate units.
Okay.
So it looks like the majority would be.
The majority would be,
be
so I
low.
had it backwards, okay.
But anyhow, that's non-compliant. It can be allowed by special exception. But my concern is that if low-income housing is constructed in a neighborhood, it will affect property values for surrounding properties. And I'm not sure that that's what we need. If people feel differently, I have 40 days to respond. If you want to talk to me privately or say you didn't consider this, I'll be certainly willing to listen, but that's my position at this time.
Okay.
Anyone else? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So carried. Thank you, folks.
I gotta read.